All right, so our body then as a stable structure is just a balancing act. If we look at, let's look at it from two ways. Let's do this first. Okay, head or head and neck. Torso or rib cage and waist, I guess we'll call it. Hips. Legs. Just a balancing act. Okay, that design allows us to stay still, so we can hide or wait or rest or whatever. Notice these guys don't do much to affect it. They're lightweights, literally. So the main structure is down through those legs. They can, of course, affect, if you're leaning on something, they can affect the pose, of course. But this is the construction. So now when we look at this, we have, anatomically, we have the straight spine connecting all these three great forms, with the waist floating between. And the legs are down through this. Now look what happens here. If we just do a very simple torso here, or hip, here, hip structure, iliac crest and such. The legs, notice if we look at this, this is just Stonehenge, isn't it? This is a post and lintel system. Every door jamb you walk through in your life is based on this. It's a very stable structure. The weight comes down of the stories above or the roof on top, and it hits that lintel. The weight comes down. The weight comes down, hits that lintel. The lintel distributes the weight out, takes all that weight in the center, distributes it out, and that does two things. It takes that weight and disperses it, so now this post only has to support half the weight. Likewise with this post. And notice that we can make that post as wide as we want, and the wider we make the post, the more stable it becomes. And that's the same way when you take a wider stance. You can't see me on camera, but if my legs get wider, now I've got a wider base, more stable. In other words, more triangular. The most stable geometric form in nature. Pyramids and mountains, they last quite a while. And notice as they erode down, they just get more and more stable. The problem with this post and lintel system is it's very, very stable, as we've just shown. It's not mobile. Stonehenge doesn't get around much. It's stuck there. So how do we incorporate as nature the idea of stability and mobility? It's the balance of those two ideas that's always fundamental. It always informs the design in the body here, because it not only has to hold still, it has to move. It's got to do both. And they're mutually exclusive. The more mobile you are, the less stable you are. The more stable you are, the less mobile you are. If you want to be perfectly stable, just lay down. But then if you get attacked by the cave bear, it takes you a while to get up and run. If you're super, super mobile or have great potential design for mobility, it's going to be hard to hold that position, or you won't be able to hold it at all. It's going to be falling over. And so that becomes a problem. There's got to be then literally a balancing act between the stability and the potential energy to change, find a pose, potential energy to change the pose. So here's how nature figured it out. Instead of attaching the post below, let me change colors here so we can see it on camera a little bit better. Instead of putting it below, we have the femur built like this, built as a little L. The greater trochanter comes in, goes on down. And now we have it attached to the sides. And we've got a pivot system it's coming in, not here, to the side, and then it can rotate back and forth. And out this way too. I'd show you, but I don't want to show off. You can put your leg way up over your head if you're flexible enough. Like that. So now we have quite a bit of mobility. Not great mobility, but very good mobility. And we have pretty good stability. Balances out. So this comes down, knee structures in here, kneecap, the tibia, and the fibula doesn't do anything structurally, really, in terms of the stance. Helps the structure of the foot, but not much else. So now we have our post here, but we have great mobility up here. And then, of course, if the legs come out, we've increased our stability. Okay? So it's quite amazing design. It's a beautiful design. So notice now, as we look at the bones or look at the muscles, when we think of them as structure, and then the movement of that structure, it can be the fluid movement off the curve, or it can be the literal movement of the structure and gesture itself. But now we get both of those impulses, both of those potentials in the drawing, the curves and the corners, the fluidity and the stability. Now we're starting to get, with every mark we make, the idea of action or potential action. So as soon as I take that straight and turn it into a curve, it gives that implication of motion. The ripples are going to move and change. Let's take that just a little bit farther. How are we doing on time, guys? Okay. Now we come down, we have that quite narrow if they come together, quite wide if they go apart. And then look at the feet. Now, the feet are not just blocks that sit like that. The feet have, let's go ahead and do that, I guess. The feet have an interesting design to them. We have an arch on the inside of our foot. So here's the inside, obviously, here's the outside. On the inside, if we took away the toes, we'd see the bone structure, vast simplification, does that kind of thing. Let's look at it from here. Here's the foot, ankle. If this is the inside, where the big toe is, as opposed to the little toe, we'll see this arch. And the arch goes this way and also goes in this way. And notice how this arch connects the heel, of course, to the ball of the foot and the toes there. And so we get impact here. We get good stability. And notice that the post now has a wide base of its own. The ankle and heel go back a little bit. Achilles tendon, calcaneus, I always forget, calcaneus. And then we have the tarsals and the metatarsals going this way. This sticks out quite far forward. So think of a little bipod camera. We've got this sticking out a lot, this sticking out a little bit. Again, more stability. It also works this way. So we can bring our feet together and we've got a arch. And so in effect, when the feet come together, we have a dome structure like you'd see in a cathedral, Gothic cathedral. And if you look at these bone structures, they actually even track the keystone type idea in some sense. And so this does two things. It gives you great support, and it takes some of the impact when you hit, when you're running around or when you're standing at the easel all day. It flexes a little bit, and those bones give, and it's a little shock absorber. It takes some of the stress off the joints so they'll last another decade or two of use and abuse. But notice how this kicks out wider, and then the little toes way out here. Nice wide base. Kicks out a little wider for stability. Comes down, or the legs actually step out wider for a lot more stability, and then it ends also with more stability. Stable, stable, stable. And then we'll look a little bit later how, tomorrow mainly, how the joints then allow us the mobility, flexibility, and the dynamics that go on there. But look at that interesting, beautiful design. Bone does two things. It protects something that's valuable inside, the organs, the brain, or it becomes the armature for the attachment of the muscles and then the movement of those created levers in that. So what we want to do then is look at the shape of each bone structure as much as we can in the time. How they come together, we'll talk about that, especially again when we get into the joints. See how it contributes to the stability of that position, and then how we can bring that potential energy, that dynamic into it so it feels like it's moving or about to move. And so we want to make sure the bones become part of our dialogue on creating structure and how the structures move and flow. And then the muscles then become part, of course, of that same mix. We want to understand the muscles as structure. The bicep is going to have a certain teardrop shape. The pectoralis major and minor together will have kind of a fan shape. We want to see how those shapes, what those shapes are. And we want to see, as importantly or more importantly, how they move. And so we have, any muscle is going to have its origin. It's going to have, that's just where the muscle begins. It's going to have its insertion, where it ends. And then the muscles themselves, the character of the muscle itself, will have the striations, the fibers that move in a certain direction. And muscles only do one thing, they contract. They either work or they don't work. And when they contract, they move that load. They move that lever that's holding that load off that fulcrum that's allowing the axis of movement. And so they either move or they don't move. And they'll move in the direction of the fibers. So if we understand that the bicep has fibers that go this way, we know that's the direction of the movement, that hinge. But more importantly, because a lot of that, not always, we'll see areas where it surprises us a little bit, but that'll give us a sense, more importantly, of how it changes shape. So what we want to know is that if we have a sense of the pectoralis group here, begins here, goes all the way over here, and attaches on the outside of the arm, and then the fibers fan out, the grouping of muscles fan out. So we have a fan shape. Now we have an egg shape. It's going to change shape as it moves. So with a little bit of anatomy, and you only need really a little bit of it, you can get a lot, but you only need a little bit, we'll start to see how the structures change shape depending on how they're working or relaxing. And that's going to be very valuable to us. So how do those forms or shapes change? And so by designing and redesigning or observing more carefully, we'll be able to get more truth in our drawing to suggest that that chest is a working chest rather than relaxing, or how that shape should change because of this articulation as opposed to this articulation.